Welcome to I Change the Narrative, a podcast for and about Black men inspiring, supporting, and empowering Black men and Black boys. This episode of I Change the Narrative is sponsored by So Organic, So Suave, also known as Sauce. Sauce is a luxury hair care and skincare refuge for those with thick hair and melanin rich skin. From healthy beard growth to top of head hair styling to illuminating skincare regimen, Sauce Essentials will naturally enhance your outer appearance to strengthen your inner confidence. Sauce invites you to accept the authenticity and real self-care and embrace your best. You can find Sauce's award-winning grooming essentials online at sossd.co. Again, that's SLOS.co. You can also follow Sauce on Instagram for the latest in product news and updates at sossd.co. Elevate your grooming with Sauce today. For today's show, we are talking about and examining the world of hoarding. For the Black community, this is not something that we really discuss, so I wanted to touch upon it as it is very interesting subject. Before we start the conversation, I want to ask our guest to tell us about himself, where he's from, and the work that he's involved in that lends itself to the topic or lived experience. Brandon.
Hi, I'm Brandon Bronaugh, the transition expert with LifeCycle Transitions. I have been in the space of transitioning people for over 12 years. I started this business, like I said, 12 years ago, and we have transitioned over 1,000 families in the 12 years that we've been in business.
Wow, that is great. Hoarding is a disorder that involves a compulsive need to keep objects, trash, or animals regardless of value. It is a syndrome characterized by excessive collecting and saving behaviors that result in a cluttered living space and brings on significant distress or impairment. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on to the show to discuss the topic of hoarding.
You're welcome.
No problem. How did you get into this business and what attracted you to it?
Well, I started a property preservation company initially working with clients that were, actually we work with banks, believe it or not. We work with banks taking dilapidated and distressed properties and getting them into what was considered as convenience condition. And as we were doing that, I would always run into various situations with people home that was more than what we would expect to in terms of being full with clutter, miscellaneous things. And we never quite understood it in the earlier stages. But then we got our first phone call when we decided to get out of the commercial space from a concerned friend of another friend who was a retired principal at a high school. And she had just retired maybe 3 or 4 years after her retirement. And her friend was really concerned about her and said that her home was a bit messy. It was more than she could handle, because initially we always get the call with the family or the friends that, when they get the call from a friend that maybe there's a fall, there's a slip, they end up in the hospital and they say, I can't get home care, or I can't get anyone back to my house. I'm a bit embarrassed. It needs a little bit of tidying. Most of us think, okay, we've let our house go a couple of days, 2 or 3 days. So I think in her case, she thought maybe she could go there and maybe tidy up for a couple of hours, only to get there to realize this was a lot more than she could handle. Then she, didn't know who to turn. She reached in the phone and contacted a junk removal at the time, because in that earlier stages of our conception, we were, we were property preservation, or how can I put this? We were a jack of all trades. So we would do the cleanups, we would do the cleanouts, we would do renovations, repairs. We would do whatever the banks require us to do to get a home in market ready condition. So when we got that call, we got the call as just a cleaning company coming there just to sort of clean up a house. So when we walked into the home, I've never in my life seen anything like that before. I've seen messy homes, but this house was filled about 4.5, 5 feet in the air with miscellaneous newspapers, debris. There had been bottles where she had not refused to, use the restroom, and she would use it in these containers instead. and we didn't know what to make of it, but we didn't want her at that time. I think we had enough wherewithal not to make her feel inadequate or make her feel embarrassed. So we proceeded as though we were dealing with a house, unbeknownst to us that there were a mental health aspect of this project that was far different than what we were accustomed to handling at that point.
Wow. Wow, that's to hear that, that's very disheartening. And I want to get a little bit into that more. How do you think hoarding begins? Is this something that begins in an early age from your experience?
That's a good question. Hoarding can manifest itself in different stages. It can be triggered in different stages.
Okay.
It can be a learned behavior. It can also be a head injury. We've had situations with clients over the years that had an accident, had a fall, and a certain part of their brain was interrupted in such a way where it brought about impulses that they never thought. And it wasn't just hoarding impulses, but impulses across the board. As you know, there's a part of the brain that measures and negotiates impulse tendencies. But with that head injury, impulses across the board, such as accumulating, buying, acquiring, or not getting rid of things, can also be an issue. But in other cases, it's a learned behavior where you grew up in a household with a mom or a dad that didn't believe in throwing anything away, and they believed in purposeful keeping and recycling and never knowing if you're going to need this particular item. So you learned over years, just like many of us who grew up in a house that didn't necessarily have a lot of resources, to eat everything you have. And if you waste things, you never know when it's going to come. So that's one element. Another element is trauma. Trauma in a sense that you were in a bad relationship, or you grew up in a violent home where domestic abuse was quite prevalent. When you start to thinking about hoarding, you would think what is the connection between the two? Well, for a lot of my clients that have a trauma related hoarding tendency, having these items and having these things creates a barrier, a wall, an insulation between them and the outside world, where they actually have a sense of security, a sense of safety, and they feel stable with all of these belongings.
Right. Okay. Talk about some of the things that you've witnessed when you reported for rescue. Like, you can get graphic if you want. Talk
Okay.
about that. Let us know what that looks like.
Well, I mean, I've done over 1,000 transitions in the past 12 years, and I typically get the call when something happens, something's going to happen, or something needs to happen. So it's usually a situation that most people can look at and conceal, and they're often able to manage. There are telltale signs, whether their car, the blinds being drawn, never being able to come to their home, them maybe appearing disheveled, maybe their desk seeming a little bit out of whack with things that shouldn't be there, out of place, and so forth. But the call that comes quite often is the one when there's a slip, there's a fall, there's a landlord, there's a disturbance, there's an apartment inspection, there's a pipe bust. These are people that are more creative than you can ever imagine. Because of this little secret that they're holding, they tend to do a lot of things to negotiate the outside world staying away. They instead of fixing the heat, they're more likely to tape it and do things to circumvent the problem rather than call like the cable guy and say that there's a cable issue. They'll go without cable. They'll go without a lot of things. And most of the times I've went in there and you'll see electrical, plumbing issues, structural issues, because simply letting people into this environment is a no-no.
Right. Does it ever shock you by what you see?
That's a good question. I mean, I think there's always surprises, but there's more similarities than there are surprises in this realm. Once you get over 1,000 projects, and I said these are 1,000 clients that we've transitioned. I've probably been into maybe 3,000 or 4,000 homes from clients that unfortunately we weren't able to help for one reason or another. But I've seen so many different variations of hoarding, whether it's animal hoarding, whether it's hoarding of miscellaneous things like Dunkin' Donuts containers, things that you and I would not even think that have any value. One would be surprised to realize that another may see it differently.
So as I was researching this subject, I saw a lot of comments
Mhm.
in the chats that this is not a Black thing. Okay,
Mm.
because I was looking up some of the comments regarding hoarders, and someone
Okay.
mentioned that we never see Black people on the show, and someone responded, this is not something that we do. However, I think that ours is more quiet. Is hoarding tied to one's social economic status or even race and ethnicity?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I've done transitions on people that were. I mean, I'm in Massachusetts, for example, you know, and you know, I've done transitions on some of the most intelligent people in the world, some of the most highly educated, Harvard graduates, MIT, you name it, you know, doctors in this, patents in that, you know, very accomplished and educated individuals that have somehow found themselves in these precarious situations.
Mhm.
And it crosses all socioeconomic and as well as ethnicities as well. You know, whether they're, you know, they're poverty or stricken, or they're on subsidized housing, or they're living in a $4 or $5 million home. The issues, whether it's, you know, related to a trauma, mentally or emotional issues that make them do or prompt them into these tendencies, it has no limitations. It doesn't. It's colorblind across all spectrums.
That's good. Colorblind. Very good. I know hoarders do not always view themselves as such. And I know this may be an obvious question, but when is it time to seek help, be it on the family or friend side, or an actual person that is a hoarder and recognizes that something may be wrong, but they can't put their finger quite on what's wrong with me?
That's a good question. I mean, when what I do with all of our clients, what we do at LifeCycle is we do an evaluation assessment for every client before we take them on as a client.
Mhm.
In that evaluation assessment, there's a lot of questions that we want to unearth. You know, we want them to see themselves in a different light, because living in these environments for any prolonged period of time, one can be um, adjusted in such a way where they no longer see things the way the outside world see it. And it's just like being affected by or afflicted by anything. The closer you are to that problem, the harder it is for you to identify how and where that problem is affecting you the most. So you
Okay.
have to often separate the person from the belonging, separate them from the environment, so that they can actually begin to see themselves and see how they are in that environment and how they're affected by that environment. So in answering your question specifically, when do you know that there's a problem? Where in our evaluation assessment, I asked a simple question:
Mhm.
how has this affected your life?
Mm,
And you'll be surprised that, you know, how many people would not have an answer. Because
mm,
if it's not affecting their life, then you don't need me. If you're not affected in some shape or fashion, then you don't need our services. Then
mm,
the hoarding isn't at a point. Most of the time they know how it's affecting their life, whether it's because they can't have people come over to their home, whether because they're not able to service the house in such a way, or whether the house itself is killing them because of environmental pollutions in the air, the dust, the dirt, you know, the trip hazards, the fall hazards. Maybe they've already been injured in the home, or maybe there's a fear of being injured in the home. There's also a book called the gentle art of death cleaning, you know,
mhm.
which prefaces a woman in her 70s, late 70s and early 80s, who believed in getting her affairs together before she passes on. So a lot of what I ask and preface with a lot of our hoarding clients, particularly the older ones and even younger ones: how would you want to be perceived if you were to pass away tomorrow? Would you think that it'd be fair for your family to have to deal with this, or would you want this secret to be revealed in such a way? A lot of times, that's one way of being able to sort of prompt them, or, you know, or incentivize them to seeing change in a situation that's going to affect other people around them.
Mhm. Are you ever baffled by what you see when you walk into these homes?
That would be, if you would have asked me that 11 years ago, 10 years
Mhm.
ago. Yeah, now my response to that is, you never quite know a person until you've been to their home.
Okay.
You know, your home tells you more about you than any other facet of your life, than what music you listen to, what car you drive,
Mhm.
your political parties. Your home tells you where you sit, where you think, where you spend most of your time, least of your time, where you're strongest, where you're weakest, where you're safest, where you're happiest. And being able to going into these environment settings, you learn so much about people that I can't share and I can't convey, and it's hard to articulate. The moment I walk into a room, you can tell if a person's depressed because the energy in that room has a life force. Your house has a life force. It's a live organism. Spiritually, it connects with you and connects with other people, just like your mood and your energy would when you greet people. They can tell if you're in a good place. Well, your house is the same way because you spend a lot of time there.
Mm-hmm. It takes a lot to do what you do. I think to keep. How do you remain mentally
Grounded?
well?
That's a
Yeah.
good question. In the earlier days, I struggle because I have this philosophy: you touch everything that touches you. And I believe the way I rationalized it is that I woke up one day with this particular concept of helping people mentally, physically, and emotionally navigate through all these different changes in life. It's like you wake up and you want to be Bruce Almighty in the movie where he wants to solve everyone's problems. He wants to make everyone happy. Well, you can't do that. And it's not that it can't be done, but you personally alone can't do all these things. And there are a lot of different variables and a lot of different things and resources that have to come in order to help people in different ways. In the earlier days, I didn't know what I was feeling because mental health for a lot of us, isn't specifically, maybe even minorities don't know exactly how they're feeling or when they're feeling something that's not necessarily healthy. The old way of saying pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just shrug it off isn't always the right way of dealing with things, specifically when you start to see the veneer begin to unfold and you begin to see all the rose colored glasses begin to dissipate. In my case, I had to engage myself with the earth in a way that allowed me to be grounded by hiking, taking long walks, decompressing, taking a much more spiritual route with dealing with people so that I can navigate from house to house to home, situation to situation. It's not uncommon that I go to 4 evaluations a day, so I'm dealing with different people in different situations, and I'm trying not to take the last person with me to the next person. The way I dealt with it is through exercise, through eating right, through meditating, through taking breaks, taking vacations, making sure that I'm taking care of myself mentally, and knowing myself when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm exerted is the most important thing. Trusting yourself.
Has there ever been when do you know when you're exerted? Because seeing this, like you're saying, can wear and tear on you. So when do you know it's time to let go? When do you know it's time to step away? And have you ever had those moments?
Oh, I try to take them all the time. When my clarity isn't when my clarity isn't there, when I can't see the problem anymore, then I know I'm part of the problem. When I can no longer empathize, I think a lot of professionals, you go into situations and you're taught on how to deal with it without feelings involved. Well, feelings involved in everything we do. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
If you're a cop or you're a police officer rather, or you're a therapist or you're a lawyer, you're a surgeon, you go into these high stressful situations and you just want to perform. You want to go in, you want to put these problems away. For me, I had to know that I had to take steps back and take more vacations when I would go into problems that would make the average person balled up and cry. I didn't cry as quickly anymore because I had been desensitized by surprises. I had been desensitized, and in those situations, I just simply wanted to figure out how I can fix it, make these problems go away. And those were the moments, or those are the times when I know I got to take a step back so that I can retune myself to be a lot more empathetic and to be a lot more compassionate and less focused on the nitty gritty of it. But how is this person affected? How are they feeling? How can I be there and be more present there?
That's good. When is it time to let go?
When you want to, that's a good question. I use that or paraphrase that with clients when I say sometimes you have to let go in order to hold on to something that's far more valuable. In the bartering of life, there's situations where we're going to experience failure. You're going to have to let go something that you held on. Some of us, it's a house, this home that you bought 20, 30 years ago, and you're faced with the situation due to inflation or due to your recent financial situation that you can't keep it. And although you went and had 2 jobs and 3 jobs, you do everything you can to keep that life, that past life of yours in order, only to realize that with 2 or 3 jobs, your quality of life is being affected. So when I tell people sometimes letting go of those material things is more important, it's more important to do that because the mental you, the spiritual you needs rest. You shouldn't work 2, 3 jobs, and nothing in this life, in this world, is that important, more important than you. And if your quality of life is now being compromised because you're in this house that's full of hoarding, full of accumulated items, and it's killing you, then you have to choose you. You come first.
Right. That's good. What have you learned about yourself in this? Because whenever we do something, whenever we're serving others, usually there's a lesson that we're to learn about ourselves. So what are you learning? What have you learned lately about yourself?
Well, what I've learned about myself is that I have to smile more. I have to be more happy or more present. I'm a person that's always planning and pushing and grinding and working hard to try to accomplish different goals. But along the way, life is passing us all by, and I wanted to be more present. So in order for me to do that, I had to take those small moments to and enjoy them. You know, going to the park and sitting at a park bench and being able to hear the birds, I mean, is important. And I always ask people, how often do you get a chance to hear those simple noises, those simple things in life that when you're moving so fast, they become a blurb. And when I'm moving too fast, I usually can't hear everything. I can't see as many things. I'm overlooking a lot of things. So I've learned now to slow down and to really take life much more serious, because it's never going to be the same. To this moment, it's never going to be the same. And everything that we take for granted is a measure of us not being appreciative for the present moment.
That's good. That's good. I don't. This conversation was so good. I learned a lot, and I don't want to overdo it. So I would like to say that this is our time. But before we end this conversation, please let our listeners know what season they can watch you on the show Hoarders, A&E's network, and then also how they can reach out to you if they need your services.
Yeah, the seasons vary depending on what platform, but I would urge the viewers to check out season 12, season 13. I'm the newest cast of the show, so a lot of my episodes are coming out that have already been filmed. So you'll have to tune in and just stay tuned to A&E. We also have our own show that we're actually in the process of shopping around. This the Transition Expert, and we have a podcast, the Transition Expert, that's also going to be launching very soon, hopefully next week or two. So please tune in to the Transition Expert, and it's going to be guests that are going to be tending in to the show that are going through life challenges and life crises and so forth.
Any social medias that you want to, provide?
Yes, please. You can check us out at lifecycletransitions.com. You can also check out follow me on the Transition Expert on IG. I apologize. You can also look at our YouTube channel that we're going to be launching as well, the Transition Expert. We're going by that moniker. I'm Brandon Bronaugh, but we're going by the moniker, the Transition Expert, because for 12 long years, we've been telling people that we're a transition company. And when most people are like, what the heck is that?
Right. Thank you, Brandon, so much, the Transition Expert, for allowing us to showcase you and the work that you do. Never in my life have I heard of someone doing this until I saw you on Hoarders. So I appreciate you. I thank you for being a part of the show. I thank you for helping people, serving people, as we do not see too many of us in this type of position. So thank you so much. Thank you for allowing I Change the Narrative to showcase your story for doing your part in changing the narrative, and lastly, for keeping your commitment by being a part of the show. That means an awful lot to me. If you've enjoyed the show, please let us know. We would love to shout you out and post your comments. If you or someone you know was changing the narrative, please contact us at iChangeTheNarrative@gmail.com. We would love to share your story. For I Change the Narrative merchandise, visit iChangeTheNarrative.org. Thank you again to our sponsors, So Organic, So Suave. You can follow Sauce on Instagram for the latest in product news and updates at sossd.co. Meet us back here next Saturday, where we'll have more great show, more great conversations at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you all so much for listening and tuning in.